So yeah, I was preparing to go on my mission. I was getting all my vaccines and all of that. And the day after, like literally the day after my mission paperwork like got sent in, I started getting like weird health symptoms, like a really painful rash like on my face and on my back, and like brain fog and fatigue. And I was like, what is going on? And then it actually took a really long time for me to get my mission call, because it was like I turned it in right before the brethren go on vacation for a month. And so it took like 2 months for me to get my mission call, and my health just like did a super sharp, like out of nowhere decline. And so I talked to my stake president, and I was like, hey, when I turned in my mission paperwork, I was super healthy and nothing was wrong. But now, like, I had to change my diet completely. I, like, stopped being able to eat, like, gluten, dairy, and sugar. So that's, like, a huge change. And it started improving my health. But it's, like, it still felt like something like that should have been included in my paperwork, you know, because that might determine where I go on my mission. And I told my stake president that, and he said, no, this spirit has told me that Satan is trying to prevent you from going on a mission, because your mission will be so important for God's work. And so we're not going to tell the brethren about your health, and you're going to go where you were called to serve without them knowing that you were sick. And so at the time I was ecstatic. I was like, great. Like, I was so nervous I wasn't going to be able to serve anymore. And that's been like the greatest desire of my heart for so long. And so I was ecstatic that God was saying, no, Satan's trying to push you down. You're going to be all right in the health department. Go on your mission anyway. And so now looking back, I'm like, that was super, super neglectful. Like, that was super irresponsible. That my health is important too, basically. You know, like, serving a mission is not more important than sacrificing my health. I had no business going to a third world country where there might not be good medical care if my health was a question. And that's exactly where I was called. I was called to South America.
I'm assuming that you probably had a lot of those scriptures in your brain about like how great your joy will be in heaven if you bring, save it be, one soul unto me, and that you are willing to put your own health and needs and concerns on the back burner. Was that kind of like in the forefront of your mind that like whatever happens, because if I can baptize one person, it'll be worth it? Like, what was your motivation?
Yeah,
besides just having that drive, it sounds like that you always had. Was there a second motivation to like convert people that's a higher priority than your own well-being?
Absolutely. There was kind of a combination of like, first that, you know, it's more important to serve God and to serve my mission and to do what he wants me to do than to be worried about my own well-being, you know, that's my number one priority is God, and my needs come second. So that was absolutely the first reason. And the second reason was, you know, there are so many promised blessings to people who serve missions. You know, they promise you health, they promise you protection, and they promise that your family will be protected. Those are the three big things that I was just really leaning on, those promises, because and those three things, you know, health, protection, and that your family would be protected, all did not happen for me on my mission. And so that was really devastating, but I'm getting ahead of myself. When I was set apart, my stake president even blessed me that all of my health problems would fade away as I served my mission faithfully. And so that was something that I clung to as I served my mission, and something I 100% believed in. I believed that the Lord would bless me for my service with health, because he had promised to, in a blessing that I believed was from God.
There's that phrase, whom the Lord calls, the Lord qualifies. And then there's also that, you know, the Lord will never give you any challenge that you can't face sort of idea. And so, yeah, you just think I'm on top of the world. The Lord's going to make me a superhero and I'm going to be able to rock Brazil. Convert the whole country, right?
Yeah, exactly. I really was on top of the world because I had the authority of God, and I had the promises of health, and that I could not fail, you know, because I had no doubt in my own ability to be faithful and to be obedient, because I had been doing it a long time. I was very good at it. And so I knew that meant 100%, it meant I was going to find success and I was going to be protected. because I believed so much in those promises and in those scriptures. And that really set me up for, just not being wise when it comes to my health, not advocating for myself and my health as much as I should have, and so that's why that rhetoric is so dangerous. Yeah.
But what I think non-Mormons won't get, and we have a lot of non-Mormon listeners, is when a church leader gives you a priesthood blessing, tell us what we're taught that means. What a priesthood blessing from a church leader means what?
Yeah, I mean, we are taught that it's very literally God speaking through the person, that, if they have the proper authority, so the church gives them the proper authority and they're using it correctly, and if the person receiving the blessing has enough faith, then anything they are promised is the word of God and it will come true. And upon your faith, that's the damaging part, because then when it doesn't come true, you blame yourself, because God can't be wrong. And when I was watching last night that part, and I just cried and cried and cried, because that's exactly what happened to me. I was so many times blessed health and blamed myself when it didn't happen for me.
I'm so sorry. All right. So how did that mission go?
Oh, man. So I started my mission with my ridiculously hard diet and my rash and being in pain and all of those things. But, keeping my diet actually helped me slowly get better. And so by the time I actually got into the mission field, because I was in MTC for like 6 weeks, because it was in Chile, actually.
Oh,
yeah,
Chile.
I served in Chile, and the MTC was actually in my mission. So I didn't even have to go far when I was done in the MTC.
And what was the mission that you're called to?
Santiago East. I almost said Este. Sorry.
Why did I say Brazil? Okay.
I said South America, so I wasn't specific. Yeah.
Okay. Chile. You're in Chile.
Chile. Yeah.
Okay.
And so when I first got to the mission field, I was the happiest I had ever been in my life. I loved being a missionary. Like I mentioned before, I had the authority of God and I knew how to use it. I just loved that I could devote every waking moment to Jesus and to God, because I just was I was so devout, and my health was getting better, and that goes on to the next story, which, as you know, as I said, I had a very difficult diet to follow. And so when I changed areas to more of an expensive area, all of a sudden I couldn't afford my food. And I already wasn't allowed, to eat dinner. Not that we weren't allowed to, but it was kind of discouraged, like seen as a waste of time, like you should work through dinner if you were really a good missionary. And so, not having enough money for food was a huge problem for someone who was starting to, at that point, experience some fatigue from how rigorous the mission schedule is. So I spoke with my mission president, and I asked him for more money so that I could eat. And I explained why about my diet and all of that. And instead of giving me more money, he told me that I had no business eating with members, and so that I needed to eat at home from now on. So that was adding 30 meals a month that I needed to pay for myself, and he didn't give me more money. And so I ran out of money even faster and didn't have any money for food. And members started to I told them, like, I'm so sorry, I can't go to your house, I have to be obedient. And so they would bring me food, or they would bring me groceries. And these people were poor, and they were giving me of their food. And the reasoning from my mission president is it was going to be too much of a burden for them to cook for me. And so eventually after a week or so of starving, I was like, no, I'm not going to starve. And so I just I asked my parents to transfer money into my account from my college savings account into my account that I could withdraw from. And I just bought my own food. And I also wish I would have told my parents then, because they said they would have sent me money. I didn't have to pull my personal money from what I needed to go to college to eat, when I paid for most of my mission. Like, I was already paying the church for my food. Like, they should have just given me enough money to eat. So that's another example of how they're more concerned with money than helping their missionaries be healthy and have enough food.
It's such a sign of power that you're literally there as a volunteer to increase their membership and the money that they receive, and you're paying for the privilege of growing their membership and the money that they end up bringing in. You're paying.
It's not like the stake president's personal bank account is affected. They have like such a pride about like, I don't know, squeezing the most obedience, the strictest rules out of their missionaries, when you probably would have been a much more effective missionary, quote unquote, if he could have, funneled a little bit more money from Salt Lake City corporate offices or whatever. My sister had a similar experience. My sister was vegan throughout her mission for health reasons, and same type of situation as well. Just, like, especially I'm sure the calories that you're burning, you're probably walking. You didn't have a car, I'm assuming. You didn't have a bike or anything.
We walked in the heat all day, every day.
Yeah. So the amount of calories that you're burning off that you need to replenish. And when you're not taking care of yourself day after day, week after week. Yeah. So then what did that manifest into? Well,
I mean, for me and for a few other sisters that I personally know of, it manifested in an eating disorder. I began to binge any moment I had to eat, because I was like, this might be the last time I get to eat today. And so I would eat until I had horrible stomach pains. I was so full because I was so scared that I was just not going to have enough energy to finish my day, because that's what started to happen. By the evenings, I would be dragging my feet because the energy to lift my foot to take a step was too much. And so it was really, that was just really hard for me. And at the end of my mission, I finally started eating dinner. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm a human being. I am not a machine. I'm going to eat dinner. And, that was with my last companion and we started eating dinner and like pushing back at the mission culture, which is ridiculous to think that eating dinner is pushing back. But yeah, I
don't want to go like, I want this to be a very nice episode for believing people, but all I'm thinking about is the documentary Going Clear. Have you seen that on Scientology? And I remember them talking about like just the way that the volunteers on the Sea Org would be like begging to, scrub the floor with a toothbrush kind of things, where like there are people in organizations who have altruistic goals. I think we all do as human beings, for our tribe, for the love of humanity, to do hard things. And that's a beautiful part. But at the cost of sacrificing, when that is just the tools of undue influence that John always likes to bring up, that are employed when you're in such a vulnerable space away from your family. And these tools of undue influence that can be really utilized in kind of frightening ways. And I'm sure you're going to keep getting into more and more and more. But all I have is just this image of like the way that people will scrub the floor with their toothbrush if they believe in a cause enough. And like, you'll stop eating dinner. You'll do all of these things. You'll like almost kill yourself for this, quite honestly, this beautiful goal that you believe in, this salvation for the Chilean people. But if it comes at the cost of, a lifelong detrimental effects of your health, there needs to be checks and balances to make sure that people are not set up for these types of like massive failures of this system, this missionary program. So that's the image that's running through my head right now. People on floor with toothbrushes, but
that kind of describes how I was. I was, sacrificing so much, but I was doing it enthusiastically. I was happy to give God everything that I had, for sure. That's how I felt. Yeah.
And Mormonism, sacrifice is a virtue. And on a mission, absolutely. It's even amplified. And so like it's almost glorified. The more you're in pain, the more you're suffering. In some sense, the more unhealthy and unsanitary the conditions, the more of a faithful, valiant missionary you are. I remember on my mission, there was an area called Polo Cheek, which was like no electricity, no indoor plumbing, tarantulas and scorpions, and people would get sick with stomach illnesses that sometimes would last years after their mission. And that was the most honorable place to serve. And the missionaries there were viewed sort of like the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets of the mission. And those elders were the ones that were made assistants to the president. And some, learned character. others were harmed in ways that had medium to long-term consequences. And that's just part of this ethic of righteousness and sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. That 100% describes my mission culture. It's sacrifice and pain and suffering and danger and health crises were glorified. Yeah. And that's awful, but that's absolutely what the culture was.
And it makes you feel like the church is more true when you hear those stories. Like, you sacrificed what? You did what? There's this YouTube channel, I think it's called Lifey now, but it used to just have mission stories from people who had different missions all around the world, and they'd come on and somebody would interview them for their YouTube channel. And when I was Mormon, I would watch all of them. I thought missionary stories were fascinating. When you hear somebody went through something really, really difficult, like getting malaria on their mission, or I remember hearing a story about somebody who was in Africa and they slept half of the day, half of the night on their mattress, but then when it got too hot because they didn't have air conditioning, they would roll and they'd sleep on the cold floor. And that's how they spent their mission, was sleeping half on the tile floor, half on their mattress on the floor, over and over. And you hear those stories and you're like, they did it for this beautiful altruistic goal of like bringing souls to Christ. And when you put it in that context, if it is true, that's a beautiful sacrifice that person made. And you kind of, anything to do with like their mental sanity and like their health is kind of on the back burner, because you start out with the presupposition that it's true, and then the sacrifice is worth it. So I know to Mormons, like it's an incredibly like uplifting story of the sacrifices that people go through. But if we back up and question, not even if the church is true, but just if the system in place is just healthy for human flourishing whatsoever. If we don't even need to go on the truth claims of the church. Just, is this healthy to set up our young people to be putting themselves in this situation? That's the question I think that we're going to be talking about the most, is like the system at play here, the rights, quite honestly, the rights of young people who sign up, who volunteer their time. What are they entitled to? What do they have a right to when they sacrifice so much for, again, this altruistic goal that can be beautiful in a lot of ways. So
I just hope that the church can wise up a bit about how they treat their missionaries and the system, because that's the thing is, yes, there was lots of different people who treated me poorly or neglected me on my mission, but it's because of the system. It's because that's how it's set up. It's set up to suppress doubt or suppress, concerns, and to glorify, like we said, unsafe situations and things that have detrimental consequences. So yeah, I completely agree. It's awful and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Okay, so you get home, and what do you want to say about the aftermath?
Yeah, I think for me, I was blessed again with health. When I got home from my mission, I received a priesthood blessing, and I, was blessed that I would heal from this illness. I hadn't been diagnosed yet, but I was blessed that I would heal upon my faithfulness. And like I said, upon my faithfulness, that's such a abusive term, because then when you don't get healed, then it's your fault. And that's just not true. There's just nothing that I did wrong to be disabled. Like, I'm sure several people in the comments might argue I should have advocated for myself more. I should have demanded to go to the doctor, or I should have walked myself to the doctor, but that just wasn't a possibility. I didn't know where the doctors were. I didn't know how to get there. I didn't have enough money to pay. I didn't have my insurance cards, and I didn't want to be disobedient. My mission president told me what to do, and so I did it. And so there was so much shame. I didn't want anyone to know how sick I was, because there was that assumption that they were going to think that I was disobedient, and that I wasn't protected because I wasn't a good missionary. And it was so heartbreaking when I felt my mission president thought that about me. I couldn't bear my friends and family thinking that about me. And so I, hid. I hid my illness from everyone but my immediate family. I was on bed rest when I got home for 3 months, and so my immediate family knew. My sister was the one who had to bring me food and help me walk to the bathroom, and so she knew how sick I was, and my parents knew how sick I was. And but I didn't want anyone else to know, because of how embarrassed I was that, I just felt like I didn't have enough faith, and that's why I wasn't healed, and people were going to think I was disobedient. And so even once I got my diagnosis, which is a mouthful, it's myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is a chronic illness with no cure. basically means I have about 10% of the normal energy that a person would have. And so my entire life is focused on expending the least amount of energy possible. So I have to use a wheelchair if I'm going to be walking more than 5 or 10 minutes. If I am fatigued, I lose my balance, so I have to use a cane. I have an even more strict diet because everything makes my fatigue or my headaches or my chronic pain worse. And, I could go on. There's lots of other symptoms. But it just...
So you came home and got a diagnosis?
Yeah.
How long did it take?
So I got a diagnosis of mono pretty quickly.
That's...
But it took a few years for me actually to be diagnosed with, because it's also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. People are kind of moving away from that name just because it's kind of a misnomer. That's only one of the 9 symptoms. And there's also a lot of stigma around it. A lot of people think it's like a fake disease, when it's very well documented to be an actual physiological issue with your cells. They have even have tests for it now. It's not fake, but there's kind of a stigma that it's all in your head. And so that was another reason I was kind of ashamed to tell people, because I was too afraid at that time of what people would think of me. And so, it took a few years, but I did get the diagnosis eventually that my mono, because mono is one of the triggers, I guess you could say, that there's several different ways you can get chronic fatigue syndrome or ME, and a virus or overexerting yourself, and I had both, can cause it. And so, every time you get a virus, you're not going to get chronic fatigue syndrome. And so that's why my doctor was very confident in saying that because you didn't rest, because you worked through such a hard virus, you developed ME. And so the diagnosis brought peace, because I knew I wasn't crazy and it wasn't in my head, because, it took a while to get diagnosed. But it's also devastating because, like I said, there's no cure and there's no treatment. They can give me painkillers, but painkillers come with their own side effects, and that's really it.
Can it go away over time?
It can go in remission. It never goes away, but it can go in remission. I know several people who have had remissions of 10 years before it came back, or sometimes some people are lucky enough to have it go into remission completely and never come back. So that's always the goal. That's what I will hope will happen to me, as I am always trying new treatments. There's lots of different treatments available that are supposed to supposedly help, but none of them are FDA approved, this is the cure type thing. It's just you can try this might help you, So that's kind of where I am at this point in my life, is trying to heal and take care of myself, because I didn't for years after my mission, as I was trying to hide it. So I didn't use a wheelchair, because then people would know that I, was sick. And so I went to BYU right after my mission, and I would, walk to the life science building because I was south of campus, and then take the elevator up because I couldn't climb the stairs. It was way too difficult for me to climb those huge long stairs up to campus. And I would just walk. I would be late to all my classes because of how slowly I had to walk. I would have to call in sick a lot to my job, but I did end up telling my boss about my condition, so she was understanding. And I would just come home every day, smiling, pretending like everything was happening as I walk down the street. And then the second I was inside my house, I would literally collapse onto my couch. And that's just how I lived for years. And yeah, it was really hard to know that the reward for my faithful service was, feeling like death all the time. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I was going to say, this reliance on priesthood blessings is so problematic. Mm-hmm. If somebody had a crystal ball and claimed to be able to see some other part of the world through a crystal ball, or if there were a witch doctor that claimed that they could burn something or rub some herbs together and cure illnesses, and they were claiming to be legitimate medical practitioners, they would be arrested or, put in jail or whatever. But Mormons to this day are still led to believe that there's this priesthood power that actually can be trusted and relied upon. And there's no evidence at all that priesthood blessings work. If they did, then every Mormon priesthood holder right now needs to go to every hospital near them and cure everybody with every disease. Make a business out of it. Like, priesthood power does not heal people. Mormons die of cancer and they die of illnesses, and, they don't cure colds. It doesn't cure flus. It doesn't cure cancer. It's just a prayer that people say to kind of make themselves feel good. That's all it is. But when you're on the faithful end of it, you make meaningful, significant life decisions, sometimes at the expense of your own safety or well-being, trusting that something's actually happening when it's not. And I don't think we talk about that enough because we're afraid to be disrespectful of people's religious beliefs. And we don't want to be super negative or critical of people's sacred religious beliefs. But it's a problem because it's not real. And people's health is real. Their physical and mental health is real. And it's a problem that we need to address because it's irresponsible for the church to keep teaching its membership that these blessings actually heal and work. There are going to be Mormons that say, no way, I got a blessing and I felt better. Well, guess what? You don't know whether you would have felt better if you hadn't had the blessing. You just don't. That's why we have science to be able to demonstrate that. And the best proof that Mormon priesthood blessings don't work is that no amputee has ever been healed. There's not one instance ever of an amputee being healed or somebody who is decapitated or, the only types of healings that happen are where there's a plausible misdiagnosis occurring or where spontaneous healing or actual physical healing is possible. So yes, a cold, a flu, maybe even some sort of cancer diagnosis or misdiagnosis, some sort of condition that maybe the doctor didn't fully understand or that would have gone away on its own. Yes, a blessing would have happened in the middle of that experience, and so you can attribute that to your own healing. But there is no evidence that Mormon priesthood blessings actually heal people. None, ever. And so again, that's a rant, but I think it affects people's lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This morning I was counting up and I was blessed 5 different times, given a priesthood blessing where I was promised that my illness would go away. And one of the times was even like, I rebuke the illness and command you to be healed. And it was like this crazy, powerful experience. Like spiritually, I felt all the fiery feelings and nothing happened, nothing changed. And I think that it's irresponsible, but it's also like, no offense, but like really dumb. Like it's just such a circular reasoning. Like if I'm healed, then it's God. And if I'm not healed, then it's also God. Like it doesn't make sense. It's just confirmation bias when it works. And when it doesn't work, you weren't supposed to be healed. And it's just like so clearly not logical now that I'm on the other side of it. But back then it was very real of like, you just have to trust. And if you're sick, it's because God wants you to be sick. And what does that do to someone's psyche to think that God wants me to be sick? Because I was promised the healing and I know I was faithful enough. So he wants me to be sick.
Or you didn't have enough faith, which again is that blame reversal thing where you just feel worse about something that is totally out of your control. And then lately, I think the brethren have caught on that people realize these priesthood blessings don't work, and it becomes a cause of loss of faith for some people to get this priesthood blessing and then have it not come true. That they've started this rhetoric of have the faith to not be healed. That's a general authority talk that's happened in the past 5 or 10 years, where they're basically saying God's power is everywhere. He'll heal you whenever you get better, and that God gets that credit. But whenever, like you said, a priesthood blessing doesn't work, it's either you didn't have enough faith, or like you said, God wants you to be sick, or you need to have the faith to not be healed. It's this circular, makes no sense harms everybody, helps no one other than the church. It helps the church because that circular logic always is reinforcing your faith or your shame.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're grateful that you got healed, you attribute that to the church, so you like the church more. And then if you don't get healed, you're broken, you're wrong, try harder, do it better. And the church benefits because you give it even more devotion than you had before. So it's a sick, circular cluster something.
Exactly, yeah.